Truth is Simple. I'm Dave Corm, your host. Today is Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. Season 2, Episode 4. We're going to be talking about education. Something that's been on our minds for a long time with COVID and all the things being taught in education. Wouldn't it be really nice to have actually somebody tell us how we got actually where we are? So there's too much into this to get us just there in one episode. So we're going to break it down. I always start by giving us a history. You need to know where everything kind of came from and how we got to where we are today. So that's kind of what we're going to get, and then we're going to break down education in the future weeks. Hopefully continue. I'd see this being maybe at least a 3, if not a 4 or 5 vlog class podcast message coming out to you guys. So today we're just going to take part 1. We're going to go talk about basically European education. They had different systems in possibly Africa, in the Middle East, and in Asia, Southeast, China and Japan and stuff is what I'm talking about. Russia, even though the majority of that country is in Asia, they tend to lean more towards the European side of education and so forth and so on. So we're just going to include them and us. But we're going to talk about Greece. We're going to talk about Rome. We're going to talk about Martin Luther and what was it called? The Reformation there of Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. We're going to talk about a little bit about the landing of the colonies and how the Puritans, like we already did about during our Thanksgiving vlog podcast, how they got here and how education was kind of like a religious setup, homeschool type event initially here in this country. And then we're going to bring us up through the United States becoming a country. We're talking about John Adams. We're going to talk about Horace Mann. We're going to talk about gentleman today, Noam Chomsky, who is huge in the education area. I agree with a lot of what Noam says, but he is I don't think he's a crazy liberal on the far side, but he is, I believe, liberal. Nothing against him. He can be liberal as long as he kind of stays somewhere in that center gap, like where I'm at as far as a conservative, I think is where I fall. I'm very strong conservative as far as stuff in education and so on and so forth. But he makes some comments. I'm going to give you probably a link to his video that's pretty lengthy. Actually, there's 2 of them. That's pretty lengthy. He goes across some good points. He talks about liberals. He talks about liberalism. He talks about how things of today has destroyed education, both maybe on the conservative side and also on the liberal side. So it's interesting to listen to that. But we'll talk about him when we get there. So let's start with where we are as far as education. Where did it start in basically Europe? I'm going to bring up a slide, and I know that the superintendent or the headmaster, the dean of education at Harvard just recently got fired for plagiarism, stealing comments and stuff from other people. I'm not so sure about that. I don't think I've ever really plagiarized someone, but as an educator, bam, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher since roughly 2012-ish. So what is that, 12 years? I do plagiarize sometimes, and as a career technical education teacher, I can't and don't know everything all the time, so at times it's good to see what other teachers are doing, either in the same district or other districts or maybe across the country, talking to people from the industry. As a career technical education teacher, my job is to kind of prepare students for hopefully their choice of what they may want to do when they graduate high school. So if they decide they're not going to the university, or they can go to a junior college, maybe get some training in that area as well, or a trade school of some type and get that a continuing education, or maybe just go straight into the job. So my goal was always to give them enough to get into the job, but I always encourage them to further that education by a technical trade school, or a lot of the junior colleges have that technical trade school within them. So anyway, that's what I kind of taught. And I would take others information, curriculum, see how it might fit into mine, and I would take it. And I would expect others to do the same with mine. If I had good curriculum, and I hope I did, I always try to keep it up to date every school year. I would hope they would take mine too, so and make it better. That's how teachers and education is supposed to work. But the Harvard lady, I don't know, using her other people's comments and so forth for speeches and that I don't think I'd do that. It just that doesn't seem like a reason to do it. But anyway, so I'm gonna bring up a slideshow here for you. The first slide hopefully is right. That is not it. That's it. Okay. I just had a big boondoggle. I was recording this a second ago and I lost a slide. Now it's in the wrong order, but that's okay. We found it. Here it is. So this comes from a video that you can go on YouTube. It's called "The School Flawed by Design." I'm sorry, I don't recall the video producer or the guy that made the video's name. I think he was an educator as well, so hopefully he understands that I'm trying to teach you about education, how we got to where we are today. I hope you will build upon my information to you and go check for yourself as well. Use the sources or resources that I'm going to provide for you. Take it with a grain of salt, grain of sand, and do your own. Maybe you can expand or explore upon whatever I might be saying to you. But it's your responsibility. I'm giving you the facts as I see them and know them. I do not know everything, is all I can say. But I'm going to hopefully tell you how we got to where we are today in our education system. All right, so it basically starts, school is not designed to make your kids, or not designed to make you as smart as you can be. It's just not set up for that. And in fact, if we scroll, if it works, scroll, it's working, yay. The gentleman that created the video, which I'm telling you to go see, I had it on the top of my other slide sheet, but it's not here. I'm sorry. If you, fella, if you go and you look for this slideshow, it's again called "School Flawed by Design." It's a video you can find on YouTube. If you probably type that in, you most likely will find it. Because on one of my slides, maybe it's still there. There it is. So right there, you can go to this video on the top right above my head there. You can see the link that takes you to the video that I'm showing you here. Slideshow here. All right. So I'll put that back up in a few minutes when we get to Horace Mann. All right. So as you can see, he broke it down into kind of like 5 categories of levels of education or history of education through Europe, which is basically what we use here in the Americas. So Greek schools and universities were kind of the foundation of where and how we got started. You can see right there a little bit of Socrates, and he was probably one of the earliest known creative thinkers, educators, teachers. I'm not sure what kind of schools they've had or who attended these schools or how they got into his class or other people similar to him's class. If you call it that, maybe it's a discussion type thing. There weren't any formalized school. They'd go to a public square, public location, and they would sit down and they'd start having a discussion. And they'd talk about this and they'd talk about that and they'd talk about something else the next day and so forth and so on. Maybe they did debates. Maybe they actually did some scientific process of discovery where they created some method of how to how the world works to a certain extent. How does a wheel work? How does the writing utensils? What is ink and what makes ink? So maybe they had these types of conversations, the beginnings of math and philosophy and things like that. So education back then, I think he was killed because he kind of fell out of step with what the government or the people in charge thought he should be doing or the way he should be doing it. So unfortunately for him, it may not be so uncommon for today. And as we talk about education a little bit, you'll see what I'm talking about with that. So Socrates is kind of like one of the founding fathers of education in Greece. From there, we kind of move on to, I stole these slides from this fellow, again, a video. Hopefully he does not mind, but I thought his video was well put together. Of course, I'm not using his commentary from the video. You can go and watch it. He gives some good descriptions and contrasting information to what I'm telling you here in our vlog and our podcast. So go check the video out and watch it. Interesting, John Amos, I don't know how you say his name, Cornelius, kind of started, let's jump back real quick. Oh, so the second we talked about Greek schools, if we go back, scroll back to here, you'll see number 2 is the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. So this young fellow, John Amos, was kind of in that time. The Catholic Church in the Middle Ages and so forth, 1592 to 1670. He was actually maybe a little bit more towards the Luther Reformation time period when there was a break off from the Catholic Church in Europe. You have to remember that since I think it was around the 4th century AD, the Roman emperor who was overseeing the Roman Empire at that time, kind of the last years of the Roman Empire, he basically made Catholicism, or Christianity, the church or the religion of the Roman Empire. And by doing so, they established what they have in Rome now, St. Peter's Square, and the Pope, and all the bishops, and all the clergy, and all that other stuff that kind of comes out of that. So that's how the Roman Catholic Church was founded, and it spread through the empire into parts of Europe and North Africa and so forth. It became its religion, so they brought this religion to the people which they were empowered, or who they had taken over as part of their empire. All right, so along with that, they taught the Christian faith, mandatory Christian faith teaching and education and so forth. At the time, they only taught basically what you needed to know. So if you didn't need to read and write as part of your job, you weren't really taught to read and write. You weren't really taught to do much English or math or science or anything like that. That was kind of preserved for those that were in favor, or those that were in power, or their children and their families, and those that were in the aristocracy of that government and so forth and so on, who was in control. They're the ones that got all the reading and the writing and the arithmetic and so forth and so on. What you got was basically an education of Christianity, most likely, and you did learn some of these other things on top of it. You know, how to shoe a horse, how to farm, how to do agriculture, how to do this and how to do that they needed people to do. That was basically the formal type of education they were giving at that time. And the elite would get a different type of education to learn to lead and rule and to run a country or an empire. So when Martin Luther came around, and there was the Reformation in Germany, which started kind of the Lutheran faith and the Protestant faith and so forth and so on throughout Europe. Education changed a little bit at that time, and that's where we see this John Amos Comenius, kind of like from the 1592 to 1670. He said basically the mom should be educated, women should be educated, because they're the first teachers of our children and so forth and so on. Kind of opening up the mind, similar to what Socrates did. You know, education should be open to everyone. It should be informative. You should be able to learn to read, and you should be able to learn how to write. You should be able to do basic math and learn what basic science is, and how to think out of the box and be creative and do different things, and how to become an artist, how to become a better in agriculture and advance it, you know, things like that. So that was the start of what we think of maybe in the United States today, what education should actually be. You know, we should be able to think out of the box and be able to do things on our own, find our own career, live our own lives and freedom and so forth and so on. And that's what education was, basically, to get that basic information, but also to then move into the colleges and the university, which is not always the way it's been in the world, or or in the United States. That was reserved for those who could afford it and those who were due to rule. All right, so let's talk about, moving from there, we're going to move to John Gottlieb Fittich. In Germany, Prussia at the time, it wasn't called Germany until probably the late 1800s. It was called Prussia, and about the time of Napoleon, Napoleon attacked Prussia, and they beat the Prussian army, which supposedly was better equipped, had more men in it, I think, is from what I heard, and so forth. So it was a lopsided victory. Napoleon won. Why was that? Well, the Prussian government, the Kaiser, or whoever was in charge at that time, they kind of said, well, why did we lose this war? We should have won. We had them outnumbered. We had more weapons and so forth. I think we had better tactics and so forth. Why did we lose? How did we lose on our countryside? If you remember, I said previously that the education in Germany, Prussia at that time, based on what Luther had done in the Reformation, because everything before was taught by the Catholic Church to keep you somewhat under control. They only taught you what you should know, to assist in what your job or your function might have been at that time. Only the elite, if you remember what I said, were the ones that got educated in the upper echelon areas, read, writing, arithmetic, and how to science and how to think out of the box. That's the way that what they taught in Germany. So after their investigation, they found out that their citizenry was too smart. They had been enlightened. They had thought out of the box. And they started to question the government. Maybe I don't want to get in the army. Maybe I don't want to go that way in a line and get shot at. Maybe I should run away. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. And I'm not going to do it unless this commander does it my way. So they had an issue with the participants, the citizenry that was in the army, following orders and doing what was asked and expected of them by the upper echelon, the people in charge, the officers, the generals, the kings, the nobles, so forth and so on at that time. So they changed the way education was set up. They changed it from an enlightened type purview into a system that was more like what you see is said right here. The new education must consist essentially in this, that it is completely destroys freedom of will in the soil on which it undertakes to cultivate, and produces, on the contrary, strict necessary in the decisions of the will, the opposite of being impossible. Such a will can henceforth be relied on in confidence and certainty. Basically, they wanted you to be a conformist. They taught you the rules. They taught you the regulations. They taught you how to not be in charge, not to think out of the box, how to be controlled. They found that was much better. In fact, as we scroll down here, the gentleman who created this did pretty nice in breaking it into a three-part education system. If you actually look at number 3, the Volksschule, I guess is how it might be said, schooling for 95% of the population is based focused on obedience, cooperation, correct attitudes, along with rudiments of literacy and basic reading and writing, and official statements of history. So they were teaching you basically how to be controlled. That they only gave you the information they thought that was necessary in the education system to control you, so you wouldn't rebel, and if another war came along, you'd be able to follow the rules and regulations and do what you were told. Roughly 5% focus on the numeracy of passive literacy and technical skills, aiming to produce a professional proletariat of engineers, architects, doctors, lawyers, and civil servants. So that's what you're seeing on the second. 95% of the population was forced into being servants, basically the lowest level, or what do you call it, the lower class. 5% kind of were in the upper echelon a little bit. You know, you were the doctors, you were the nurses, you were the theorists. You're the ones that created the internet. You're the ones that built the rocket to space. You're the ones that are building the newest and latest technology today as we look at this. So 5%, all right? And 0.5%, so maybe it's actually 4.5% because the number doesn't equal up to 100 if you take it literally. And the 1.5% learn the critical thinking and the literacy, the persuasive language, how to talk to people, how to persuade and get them to follow your goals, your idea, what you wanted to accomplish in life. The first focused on the classic languages, humanities, and later focused on utilitarian subjects like modern languages, math, and sciences. So they're the only ones that learned that. 0.5% are the only ones that really, the aristocracy are the ones that got the information they needed to stay in control. They got the information, they knew it, they knew how to advance, and we're not sharing it with the other two groups below. Bam. So that's what happened in Prussia as a result of Napoleon beating them in the Prussian education system. All right, so let's talk briefly about the United States, or at the time it was the 13 colonies. If you go back to my vlog podcast where I talk about Thanksgiving and that holiday, talk about the Puritans escaping the UK for religious persecution reasons and coming to the Americas. There were those that came to make money, but a majority, if you do some research, the majority that came here were running away from persecutions. Maybe not so much like the people that are invading our country from the southern border right now. We all invaded, I think. All of us, in one way or another, invaded this country, except for if you were a Native American, right? We all invaded here from somewhere, whether you came across from Russia, which basically colonized most of the western Canada and the western United States. In fact, we bought Alaska from Russia. If you didn't hear about that back in the 1800s, there you go. All right, it was a part of Russia at the time. Education in the 13 colonies was based, because they were Puritans, they were religious, was based on the Bible. They took basically what the fellow a few minutes ago I had spoke about up here, John Amos. They took his parents or mothers should teach their children education. They took that to heart. Basically, your first home schools were set up that way. Bible was primarily the main textbook because that was really one of the only main printed books at that time, mass printed books at that time. It's not like today where you could walk around and see books everywhere. That's not reality. It was a privilege to own. It was a privilege to have a book. It was a privilege to have have a book printed. They were probably all mostly technical books or some kind of documentation of writing documentation about the history of whatever it might have been. The UK, the King of England, if you remember, he had basically started writing the history of England, tracking it and keeping it for us, I guess, or in future generations to know what England was like at that time, and recording the history. So that's what they basically taught in the early colonies. After the colonies rebelled and became the United States, probably one of the first forefathers that made a big deal about formalizing education and making it a public item, whether the federal government or local cities and states or communities built them themselves. Public education, he thought, was important and vital for a citizenry to grow out of an agrarian, basically an agricultural type society, into what at this point had not quite come, but within the next 25 years, the Industrial Revolution. So John Adams was the first one to kind of think about that, see what's coming, and said we need to educate our citizens to move to the next step in what the world is going to be. He also thought that it was important for the populace, the voting populace, to be able to know and understand and who they would be voting for. For a democracy, he thought it was important that not just the most popular guy, the best speaker could go out there and win an election, but somebody could actually read newspaper articles or book articles or really find out the content of someone's character as to should this person be in public office or not, represent me as a citizen. So he thought in that as well it was important and vital for the process of education. I think I stated in one of my podcasts that the percentage of the northern states was around 85-90%, if I'm not mistaken, could read and write, while the southern states were somewhere around 60%, 65%, I think I said, somewhere in that ballpark. So there's quite a difference from the north to the south as far as education. So with that all happening, let me see. So we talked about that. Frederick Taylor, I'm not going to talk about him. And I'm probably not going to talk about this fellow either. Not that they're not important. But they really didn't, in my opinion, didn't have a lot of effect on the United States at the time. So who I want to talk about is the next guy. And that is this guy, Horace Mann. You may or may not have heard of him, but he's considered to be kind of the father of American education. He was a member of Congress in 1837, so still kind of like the beginning of the United States at the time. He became head of the Board of Education in Massachusetts, from where he was from. And he thought that it was important, just like John Adams, that that education become a public school type element. There needed to be some kind of formal education of the citizens. By this time in 1837, the Industrial Revolution was just now starting to kick off. We were moving from sailboats, the sailing vessels, and we were starting to build trains. We were starting to have boats that had steam engines in them, paddle wheel type boats, and eventually ones that had a rudder and a propeller on the back over time. So the Industrial Revolution was on its way. It was coming. And they thought we needed to have a populace that could step in and they could lead us into the next revolution, the Industrial Revolution. So Horace Mann was researched and was looking for an educational system that was working and beneficial, that he thought he could start or bring to the United States. Again, education-wise, we look out of the box, we see what other people are doing. Just like, as I said, as a teacher, I might borrow or take or swipe somebody else's stuff. They might take some of my stuff, and that's okay. That's just the way it works in the education system. If something's great, why would you have to redevelop it to your meaning or manner when it's already somewhat been done for you, right? So that's what he was doing. He was looking and said, what can I find to bring here to start in Massachusetts? I'm the head of the school board. We need to have some kind of governmental education program, some kind of public schools per se. All right. So what he found in 1846, he went over to Prussia at the time and saw their model. This again is after the Napoleon invasion and attack. The Prussians reformalized their education from kind of an open-minded, a growth, self-evaluation, and enlightenment, and learning on what you could do and what you could become, back to a system where they were teaching the control module. They wanted to only teach the students what they could to keep them under control. Only the 5% at the top, or those in the elite, that 5% in the elite, the wealthy, the well-to-do, the leaders of the country, got the other formal education where they could actually start to do and see and be and grow and expand, and that type of enlightened education. So in '86 they brought it back, and they basically adopted the Prussian model of education in Massachusetts quite that same year. I understand from what I read and so forth. New York basically did the same thing. So 46 in 1865, was basically those early years was the Civil War, during the Civil War time, and after the Civil War was done, that same education system was adopted in the southern states, and has basically been what's the United States education system has followed since that time. So it went from an education system that was basically biblically taught and by mothers and daughter or by parents and so forth to their children. Some of the early days, the communities prior to the United States becoming a country, and Horace Mann and John Adams talked about creating a public education system was based on education from the Bible. Groups would get together in small towns. Parents would pay a teacher. Their kids would go to that kind of education. But at the time, the Bible was the main textbook at that time. After this point in 1846, of course, by the adaptation, curriculum was started to be created and so forth, based upon what the need was. Early on, it was basically trying to teach people the same, to be enlightened about the Industrial Revolution, something that would keep the Americas ahead of the United Kingdom or England, France, Germany, or Prussia at that time, Russia or other countries, trying to stay at the top of the Industrial Revolution as far as, so they would teach the students would get an education that taught them what they needed to know to keep us growing and to be equal or to jump ahead, advance ahead of these other countries. There was and I talk about the Prussian system right there, Napoleon and everything is right there. So let me just see if I can jump back real quick to this one. And if I scroll down, I think it's in here. Oh, maybe not. Okay, it's not there. So Horace Mann used Prussian education. Oh, yeah, it is. I think it was. This fellow right here. Frederick Taylor in 1856 to 1915. So this was pretty much the height of the Industrial Revolution. He actually wanted to take away what I had just told you about the initial preparing and moving into the Industrial Revolution, having our citizens be creative and thinking out of the box and kind of leading us along with the other countries in the world trying to stay ahead. He wanted to flip it back the other way. We don't need people like that anymore because they're all in competition with us. So he's saying we need to put the brakes on. We need to go back and we need to think about our education system. So he wanted to remold it, as it says basically right here, into an educational system where they just taught the basics. So instead of the workers being somewhat creative and so forth and thinking on their own, he wanted to take it back to like the Prussian system after Napoleon, when they put some basically a control. Only teach them what they need to know to do the job they're going to do, basically for the rest of their life. So that's what he wanted to do, all right? So you can see a transformation of our education system, one from parent-taught, Christian-based, or Catholic-based, or religious-based, into a public school system that was kind of initially based on the Prussian system, which, because of when it started at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we wanted our people to be more creative in thinking and so forth and so on, to a period when the Industrial Revolution was in its full-blown expansion, to now reteaching our kids not so much about how to think out of the box and become this and that, but to just be worker bees, all right? So based upon echelon, where are you? Are you in the upper class, middle class? Still wasn't much of a middle class, or at the lower class at that time, all right? So that's what Frederick Taylor basically wanted to do. So let's jump to education today. And where is it? Well, today, We've kind of jumped through these hurdles a couple times. Uh, we've had different curriculums. They want the model where you're thinking out of the box recently. I think that's what we've been doing quite a bit. Thinking out of the box, college prep schools. In fact, the high school I taught in Temecula, the whole district, they had only 3 high schools, but the whole district was basically a college prep. They didn't even really care, and I challenged them to it. One of the principals, they had like a college career day, I guess you could say, where they were really pushing the students on, this is the classes you need to accomplish to get into the university, and da 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 da. And I went to part of it, that thing, and they broke it in, so the whole high school went. So they broke it into 2 sessions. So half the high school went in the morning, second half went in the afternoon. But it was all about colleges and universities and everything to do, what you needed to do to get into it. And as I'm standing at the base, looking up at the students and sitting in the stands in the gym, maybe a quarter of them were paying, or maybe a little more than a quarter of them were paying attention and really interested. And the rest were like, you could see it, I ain't going to college. I'm not going to the university. That's not in it for me. I'm done with school once I graduate. I don't want any school. I've had enough. And that was kind of like me when I was in high school. I went straight from high school into the job. I graduated, and 2 weeks later I was working part-time, and within a month I was working full-time, and I've worked basically my whole life. And then I went back to school over time through my careers and got education that was necessary for me to advance or become a general manager and to run a casino and to become an educator and a teacher and so forth. So I went back to school afterwards, and I did much better in school, I think, when I went back, because I had learned a lot of things about life and how to run how a business works and so forth, that I went from basically high school graduation, a 2.8 student, to a 4.0 student in Summa Cum Laude in both of my bachelor's degree classes. Because I had learned, I could have probably taught the classes, the business administration and human resource management classes in my bachelor's degrees. I probably could have taught both of those because I lived in the industry, and that's what I did for a lot of years. But I needed I needed to get a piece of paper and pay money, because I couldn't test out. You had to go to get the paper to get the job, or to get the promotion, or to run that business. Seems kind of backwards, but in reality, that's what happened. But anyway, we were talking about, let's talk about Noam Chomsky. Huge in education. Big, huge in education. I have a slide for him, I think. Let's see. Hopefully I won't click the wrong button right now. All right. So Noam, if you go, I have a YouTube link on here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Probably not. Yeah, you can. So if you look at my mouse right there, there's a link to a YouTube page. Excellent video. I got most of the information that I made, these little bullet points from there. And as going through and getting my master's degree in education and becoming a career technical education teacher, and being certified in California and then later in Nevada, in fact in California as a young teacher, I was surprised when I went to my high school, and at the end of the year they kind of ask you, are you coming back? And we may or may not have a position for you based on funding and everything. I was really worried my first or second year I was there, because I was thinking, man, I'm brand new here. If they're looking to fire a teacher, I'm probably going to get it because I'm on the bottom of the totem pole. But in fact, I wasn't. I was actually towards the top, because I had so many certifications and I could teach so many things that I think I was like, other than the few doctors that had PhDs and so forth at the school, I was like in the top 10 or 15 teachers at the school as far as certifications and everything. So I thought, I'm probably not going to go anywhere for a while. But anyway, beyond that, even having the master's degree, I had not really thought about what Noam had said here, because I'm so busy in creating the curriculum for my students to get them on track, to get them what they need to do to graduate. I really hadn't thought, we come into the school system and they have these different forms of, teach by the test. I never really fully agreed with that. As a career technical education, most of the classes I taught were hands-on. So there was a component of written, component of reading, and so forth in certain areas, components of math, depending on what I was teaching and typing and other stuff, coding and so forth. But most of it was hands-on. So while I would score them on a test, written test of some type, there was always a practical part of the test where they had to demonstrate to me they could do what the class or that topic or subject matter was required for them to do. So that was different than most other classes. So I had to have tests because that's what management wanted, some kind of paper test. But most of my testing was based on, can you perform what you were taught, what you were learning. And kids, students, anybody learns in several different ways. One is by watching, one is by reading, one is by writing, and one is by doing, basically. Those are the methods of learning anything in life. And the more you can do it, the better you just become at it. If you move away and stay away from it for a period of time, it almost absolutely will become lost to you. So you have to kind of do the same things day after day to get better and better at what you do. And there's a thing called 10,000 hours in athletics. It takes, not every athlete, there are those ones that are special. It takes a lot of athletes up to 10,000 hours to become at their peak of performance in a specific specific sport. So as we talk to Norm and talk about Norm here, he makes a good comment. There's two types of education, and we keep bouncing in between them. He's right as far as that goes. And as it's stated right here, purpose of education, two types of education, personal enlightenment, which we've kind of been on for a little bit. What am I going to, everybody's college prepared. We need to get our students thinking out of the box. So 2 + 2 really doesn't always equal 4. Yeah, it does. There's some things that are in solid rock, but some things that there's open. Got to have an open mind to, able to look for better ways of doing things. Right? We can look at what's the name of that rocket? The rocket company? I forget. Gosh, Elon Musk and his SpaceX company. They think out of the box. Why hasn't NASA created some of these things? Why doesn't NASA have a booster rocket that could land itself on a platform? Huh? Why not? Oh, because we always just threw them away? I don't know. Because we're wasteful? Because it was too hard to come up with a methodology to do that? Well, he did it in 5 or 6 years, 7 years. So things like that, thinking out of the box. That's what education is. In my personality, that's the best kind of education. I always try to get my students to think out of the box, how to get better at something. And then the second form is conforming, which is basically the Prussian model, which was brought here by Horace Mann. And we kind of flip-flop it from time to time, every 3, 4, 5, 10 years. We'll bounce a little bit from conforming to personal enlightenment, and then back to conforming, and back to personal enlightenment. And right now, I think we're transitioning from personal enlightenment back to conforming after about 5 to 10 years. Technology and education, culture and education, and testing and education. It's all different. Norm, like I don't 100%. There's things that you need to have a written test for, and things work a certain way. I mean, algebra, trigonometry, calculus. There are some known factual things you have to do it this certain way to get there. You need to also be able to open the box and look at super extreme advanced math that we haven't discovered yet. We don't know everything, so you need to be able to think out of the box and think why some of those things which seemed true and factual may not be as true and factual as we thought. So that's good to have as well. Not everybody, like our high schools, I said, are all college prep, and those students sitting in the stands, going through the process because they were forced to sit there, even though they weren't going in their minds at that time to a college of any type. They just wanted to be done with high school. You need to have a second offering, and I went to my vice principal who put that on and said, what about the 5, 10, 20% of students who are not going to college? And he looked at me funny. I said, you didn't give them anything. And he said, came back and eventually said, Dave, you're right. I didn't give them anything. But that's the way the district was going. So is the district always right in saying that everybody's going to college? Well, we're prepping them for college. Whether they go or not, that's up to them. But we're going to make sure they're ready to go. So are you giving them the education they need to succeed in life? Probably not. Like I didn't go right off the bat. I went some years later to college and university. Two types of contrasting. Who's education for? Who is it for? So we're breaking this down right here. And we're looking at the elites, the privileged, the intelligent minority. He gives me some information there about a Walter Lippmann in the 1920s. He was kind of a educationalist who kind of followed along with President Wilson and Kennedy, liberal type mythology. Only certain people get certain educations based upon their hierarchy in society. Private schools versus public schools. Why do we want to always have public? Because the government will lose control, at least some, if not all control, in a private school. So in a private school, they can diversify, they can be more informative and open up more towards an education that's towards personal enlightenment, while the other is conforming. They can get you to conform. You're going to learn reading, you're going to learn literature, you're going to learn math, you're going to learn this type of science, you're going to learn geography, you're going to learn the history, American history, you're going to learn world history, you're going to do physical education. So they're going to teach you these specific things, right? Which I think are important. Everybody should learn reading, writing, arithmetic, some basic math, science, and then be able to think, and history. History is probably, people look at it as that being negative. But here we go. I'm giving you a history lesson right now about our education system in America. Where do you think our education system is right now? It's messed up. We got one party. Here I go, making it into a party thing. But all you got to do is open your eyes. One party is doing nothing. The conservative party is doing nothing. Those that are conservatives, they're starting to fight back and say, I don't want my kids to learn this. But they've lost control because they've given their kids to the public school system and to the government, who decides what they will learn. COVID was a good example of that. Dumbing down society and making sure they get left behind, a society that cannot stand up and fight because they don't know anything. Dumbing down society. Hate to say it, but President Obama basically said the American people are stupid and dumb. If you go back, you can find that probably on the internet somewhere. He's making a statement on TV or something like that, and basically says Americans need my help. They need us because they're not smart enough to do it. Same thing with our vice president. She said the exact same thing in the last election, and I was like, well, is anybody listening to this? Are we that dumb? Well, we elected both of them. So if they got elected and they didn't do what they say they were going to do, and they changed their minds and did something totally different, then, shame on us for not being educated enough or listening to them enough to understand they were going to do exactly what they said they were going to do, or not what they said they were going to do. So education, is it like that? What is education for? Noam Chomsky discusses this as well. And he contrasted it against two things. Education is like, or a certain type of education. This would be basically the type 2 education, where they're just teaching you the education that's from Prussia, the conforming type. Education like pouring water into a leaky vessel, following the instructions. It's like following the instructions in a cookbook, is what I said. A recipe to be pre-known as a result. So that's what the government, I think, is trying to mold us back to right now at this point. They're just giving education out there, current sexual education, failing math, failing science. Our written and comprehension tests in education throughout the country is probably at the lowest it's ever been, up until the point where before we even became a country. I gave you the stats of what I think it was 94% or 95% in the northern states could read at the time of revolution, and like 65% in the South. If you look at the numbers now, it's probably lower than that. So that's where we're moving to right now. The government wants total control, so they're dumbing education for our students, so that when it comes to time, if the government needs them, they won't stand up and fight. They won't say anything. And that's where we're going to in education right now. The second is education is like laying a string to which the student can extend it in any direction, basically, of their choice. Creating a recipe to something new and unknown. Education, I would like to say that's where we were, or where we were trying to go for the last 3 to 4 or 5 years. It never really got off the ground. It's got flipped back over on its other side to where we're basically in a Prussian educational system, where it puts the students down and does not give them what they need to succeed. Going to the college or the university is not a priority of those in power. The school boards, the teachers, unions, the state board of education, the United States Board of Education. It's more of a controlling type epitaph to make sure that the citizenry is not smart enough, won't say no, and won't resist what's coming their way. So with that said, now that you have an idea where our education has come from, how it's progressed to where it is, and how it is today, I'm going to stop and ask you to go back and do your own little research. I gave you the video here for Noam. That is a very good video. I think you should really watch it. In fact, there's another link. I didn't put it on my screen. I didn't give it to you, but maybe I will next week. That he does like an hour and 20-minute talk. I think it's at the University of Arizona. Actually, I brought that video up right there. And there was another video right next to it, which took me to that video. See if I still have it up here. See if I still have it. I think I do. No, maybe. I gotta back up one more. Nope, it's gone. So anyway, I'll see if I can find that and give it to you next time. But with that said, I think you kind of have an idea where our education system, how it's matured, where it came from, and how it got to the point where it is today. What are we going to do to fix it? We're going to talk about that in the coming weeks. I think education needs to be every state's different. So I think we need to set up as a country, we need to come to an agreement on what kind of education we want for our kids. The cost of education, not only in the free education in public schools has become very expensive. I think we need to look at it as from a business direction. And I want to show you one last thing. Let's see if I can find it. In the video, the very first video we did, this guy put like a little thing at the very end. Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, let's see if I can drag that up so I can actually see it and read it. So he broke this, in conclusion, he broke down the educational system. So schools are right here in the center. And you can see government, regulated schools, and administration. We are leaning extremely hard on that right now. Academia it's going in its own direction, and it's all over the place too. Some of the schools are taking the intellectual, while some are teaching controlling mechanisms. If your teacher at your school is saying, the only way you're really, I'm not going to tell you this, but the only way you're really going to pass the class is if you believe and think the way I think. You're doing the Prussian version of school, where somebody, whether it's the teacher, the education system, somebody outside the education system, the government, or local businesses, want to control what you know and what you're going to say and do in the future going forward. Which brings us to the corporations down here at the bottom. One of the big things I know as running several casinos, owning my own businesses and so forth, it's hard to find good people. Teaching basic fundamentals, time management, showing up on time, ethics, morals, values, putting the customer first, so customer satisfaction and so forth like that. Just common sense stuff. Going a little bit farther, I know the clock, you're off at 5, but if you can stay 5 extra minutes because the next person coming on, I can't really do without you. You'll get compensated, don't worry about it type thing. No, I got to leave. I got more important things to do. So loyalty to the business and company or your job, that type of thing goes a long way. And finally, we look at the parents. So you have a 4-star spot here of who's involved and connected. Parents are paying the money, whether it's property taxes for your kids to go to school. My kids are all grown up, but I'm still paying property taxes. So I'm paying for your kids to go to school. And I don't appreciate what your kids or what they're teaching your kids in the school systems right now. Nevada is bad. It sucks. Last in the nation for teaching, last in the nation for educating our students. Somewhere towards the bottom for student financial assistance per each student. I have a lot of things how we can fix Clark County School District. One might be sometimes things get too big and you need to diversify. And it's the same in the business world. Start looking at it as a business because they spend over $5 billion a year in that school system. So looking at ways to improve, how to reduce costs, how to improve education, technology, and so forth and so on. So I have a lot of ideas on that. We may talk about those, but parents, you're 1 in 4 on this scale. You're an equal partner to the education. You're the one paying the money for your students to go. Investigate the schools, whether it's a public school or elementary school or whether it's a private school or charter school, whether it's a college or a university or a technical trade school. It's your money. Stop throwing it away. If the school's not producing what you expect on the back end, then don't send your child there, no matter how much they whine and cry to you about, I have to go. I had a daughter that was that way. My oldest daughter was dead set on going to this university, and she wouldn't go to a junior college. Little did she know that half the classes that she wanted to take at the 4-year university, she couldn't take, and she ended up taking them at the junior college. She paid the full semester, a full year tuition, and probably 2/3 of her classes she had to pay for at a junior college for $150 a class. Anyway, and so there you have it. You know what? It's only the last 2 years. Go to the junior college, get your education there for almost nothing for free, and then do your last 2 years at a college and university of your choice or one you can get into based upon your grades. The people that are hiring you or when you leave that university, they don't know whether it's Harvard or UCLA or Stanford or Berkeley or any university. They don't care where you went the first 2 years. They don't see that. All they see is a bachelor's degree from Texas A&M or wherever it's from, wherever you graduate from. So be smart with your money and time and so forth, and that's all I got to say about that for now. So hopefully we'll pick up part 2 next week, and I'm not exactly sure what we're going to talk about. We're going to narrow it down. I mean, there's so much, the universities and so forth. We could talk about that, or I can really break it down and tear apart Clark County School District as what I think. I was running for their board last year, school board. Didn't quite get there. There were a lot of us running because the previous person on the board was in constant conflict with the other board members. Maybe right or wrong, but nothing was getting accomplished. Pretty much the same as this year with the new 3 people that I think got on the board. And they just added, I think it was the 4 local cities added someone from each city to the board as kind of an advisory position. And the board took their voting rights away. Those new 4 people's voting rights away, and so forth. So anyway, it's a mess. It's a mess here. Every time you look at the news here in Las Vegas, all you see is like, oh my gosh, what else can come up? Violence in our schools, education's at the lowest of any state in the country. We're down 1,200 teachers like we've been for the last 5 years. Expenses, teachers want to go on strike but can't, and because of their clause with the state won't let certain people go on strikes. Teachers are one of those, but they just signed a new contract, and now somebody that's just gonna be becoming a starting teacher is gonna be making more money. Why don't you work that into the contract, raising the people that are making less than what's going to be minimum wage up to the part where they're going to be making an equal amount of money above what the minimum wage is. Anyway, sometimes, that's what happens when you leave people in charge that don't know what they're doing. Anyway, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to talk about next week. Hopefully it'll be about education, but if something else pops up that I think is absolutely more important at the time, then we'll talk about that. With that said, you guys have a great week. Stay out of trouble, and we'll see you next time here on The Truth is Simple. Or just remember that sometimes the truth hurts. Oh, one last thing. If you found this helpful or not, but funny or not, share with somebody. Tell them to come watch. And I'm on a Rumble. I'm on here on YouTube, and I'm on a Patreon. So you can find The Truth is Simple on any one of those locations. Again, have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye.